Hello and welcome to the Shaken Up Show, the show that looks at all things Bury AFC. I'm your host, Nick. Now, when it comes to football finance, there's only one person to turn to. With over 2 million downloads to his Price of Football podcast and a second edition to his book, please welcome to the Shaken Up Show, Kieran Maguire. Kieran, hello, how are you?
Thank you very much for the invite. Looking forward to this.
Fantastic. So I bet it's been a busy week for you so far. Obviously, we'll get to the nitty gritty of the European Super League in a bit. But yeah, I've been a bit crazy. But first of all, I want to congratulate you because it's 2 million subscribers to your podcast, 2 million downloads.
Yeah. We have absolutely no idea why, because when the show was pitched to both myself and Kevin Day by producer Guy, and myself and Kevin hadn't met, we sort of met for the first time, and it was one of the when you meet somebody at party and things are a bit awkward, and we're both going, this ain't going to work, for two reasons: A, who's going to listen to two 60-year-old blokes, and B, they'll run out of stories in 3 weeks. But producer Guy was convinced. And myself and Kevin, it turns out, have actually got a lot in common. We're both from Irish migrant families. We both grew up in South London. We both support small provincial clubs, and we're both football romantics. And to a large extent, we said, we'll go along with it because the producer said the first show we want to be on about Bury Football Club. And I was furious about what Steve Dale and Stuart Day had done. Kevin was equally angry. So we thought, well, even if we just get one show out of this, we'll have a chance to point the finger at the guilty parties. And that was 18 months ago. And the show has proven to be we don't know why, but we'll sometimes it's best not to know why, because you concentrate on what you think is good, and rather than keeping it natural.
So for those who don't know, it's a show based on the financial elements of football, isn't it? So it's about football, money. You talk about accountancy. You talk about prize funds. You talk about running costs. On paper, it doesn't sound like the most amazing podcast, but if you haven't listened to it, really do give it a listen, because as I say, you and Kevin are a great partnership. You're like the middle-aged Ant and Dec, I suppose, the southern middle-aged Ant and Dec, but you really do bounce off one another, and it's a really good combination, I think. And it sounds like you've known each other for generations.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. I mean, I for my sins, and this is a terrible thing to say. Originally, we were going to approach Justin Morehouse because I was living in Knutsford in Cheshire at the time, and the producer, I know the producer because I go in and work at the BBC in Salford Quays quite a lot, and I just said to my wife, I'm getting a bit fed up. It's hard work catching the 6:11 from Macclesfield on a Saturday morning to go to watch Brighton every other fortnight. And she says, well, if truth be told, I'm fed up to the back teeth of not seeing you every Saturday because all you do is go to football. So I said to her, let's flip things about. Let's move down to Brighton. So that way I can go and spend more time after a match with my mates down the Boozer, because I had to leave as soon as the final whistle went. I had to leg it to the station, catch the train into Brighton from Falmouth, where Brighton plays at Falmouth Station, then get a train up to London, get across London, and get the last train from Euston to Manchester Pick. So, and if there'd been an accident on the line or something had gone wrong, it was quite hairy at times. So. My wife's a wonderful woman, and she just said, okay, let's do it. So because I knew I was moving down south, and this is classic, man's middle life crisis, I'm moving 250 miles to be closer to my football club, but I still work in Liverpool.
Yeah.
She somehow thought that there was some sanity in that. So I thought, well, if we get Justin Morehouse and I'm moving down south, that ain't going to work.
Yeah.
I know of Kevin because clearly of a Match of the Day too, and you know he's a well-known stand-up comedian and he's a writer and so on. So I just pitched to him on Twitter, and you know you've got to give him credit because you could sense that he was too polite to say no, but he clearly thought, well, I'm not interested in finance, and you know this show is going to die on its arse because who in their right minds is going to listen to it? But it does seem to work. You know, Kevin and I, we've got the same. I think we've got the same values in the sense that we believe that every football fan is of equal importance in the country, and every football club is of equal importance in the country. So on Monday's show, although the European Super League story had broken, we were committed to telling a story about Swindon Town because they've got a scumbag owner.
Yeah.
Now, you know, they're not the only club to have had scumbag owners, as you know, the very fact that we're having this conversation. So, you know, that's always been our philosophy, and I think we've built up interest because the people that listen to the show know that we will try and stand up for the fan. You know, and my job as a teacher who knows a little bit about money is to say, okay, we've got these stories. Let's just try and simplify them. And Kevin is the bloke in the pub asking the questions, and I'm his mate who just understands a little bit more than he does, and somehow it works.
It is. It's a really good partnership, and I mean, you know, I listen to it every Monday on the way into work in the morning. So yeah, well done on passing that milestone. It's absolutely incredible. For those who don't know, Kieran, just explain what do you do? How do you know all this stuff? What for those who, you know, for the average Joe who just tuned in and flicked on this, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm a teacher. I teach at the University of Liverpool. I've been teaching since the 1980s. So, you know, and I teach on Wall Street and I teach in Canary Wharf. But yeah, that's sort of, you know, fairly heavy stuff, and it's, you know, I've got to wear a suit rather than this frankly ridiculous shirt.
I like it.
And I've always used football as a vehicle to explain things, because teaching at university, I'm a generation beyond the kids themselves. So, we've got no common touch points, because if I start talking about music, I'm talking about the Clash, the Damned and the Pistols, and they're going, what's he on about? But all of my teaching at university has been at Manchester and Liverpool. So I've lived in Manchester. I went to university in Manchester in 1980, which for sport and music. And Manchester at that time, there was no better city in the world, because it was Joy Division,
all that kind of early 80s.
The Fall and everything that went along with that. So I used football as a vehicle. If I go in and try to tell students about, this is the funding for a takeover of an industrial company in the UK, and I've got 150 kids in the room, and I've got 150 kids with mobile phones, I've got no chance, because I'm fighting against TikTok. I'm fighting against WhatsApp groups. If I go in and say, why have Manchester United not signed any players this summer? And they go, well, because Mourinho's a bit of an arse, or because they've not been able to bid enough. Oh, it's due to the Glazers. I say, okay, let's take a look at these numbers, and then I'll show them a table which shows that when Sir Alex left Manchester United, they owed £13 million in outstanding transfer fees. By the time Mourinho had been there a year, they'd owed 258 million. Effectively, what Manchester United have been doing over 5 or 6 seasons since Sir Alex retired was that they've been using their credit card to buy football players. And I go, okay, well, what happens if you max out on your credit card? And the students go, well, you got to go and start paying it back. So that's what they've done. And so what I'm using is, I use football as a vehicle to teach traditional financial issues. But because people, especially people in Manchester and Liverpool, they love football, they take an interest, because they can go back and tell their dad or their mum, who are also United or Liverpool or City fans or whatever it's going to be, oh, I found out about this about the club today. I've actually got the easiest job in the world. All of my colleagues at work are really cheesed off with me because now I just teach dedicated football finance modules. Loads of people sign up for it. And when I say, okay, guys, I'm going to give you a 4,000 word assignment to do, whereas for every other of my colleagues, the students go, oh, Jesus Christ, is that? For my students, it's a chance to investigate their club, and then they can then whenever they're out with their mates, they know more about the club than their mates do. So they it's good for their standing in their family and their friends groups. And as soon as they start it, because it's the club that you love, it's not a piece of work. It's because it is that emotional relationship they have with the club. So I never get any moans when I set work, whereas all of my colleagues, it's like trying to extract teeth to get students to do work.
So that's the good thing about football. It transcends over so many different areas. And I mean, if you can, build a course around football finance, why not? There's obviously a lot of people. Well, there's obviously 2 million people interested in it because they're listening to your podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are surprised at the number of regular listeners that we have and subscribers. I mean, it's 2 million in total since we started. It's not 2 million a week.
Yeah.
But what we have found is that it's listened to at the EFL, at the Premier League, at the FA, and by an awful lot of people that work in the industry. And we've been both flattered and slightly scared by that, because at the end of the day, we are just two old blokes having a moan. But we try to be fair to every club. And if Manchester United do something good, which they were very good at the inception of the coronavirus, we said, let's give them some praise. If they do something which is bad, in our view, such as refusing to pay employees the Manchester real living wage, we'll criticise them for that. And to be fair, we have had contact from the club, and we didn't seek it because who's going to talk to us? But the club's reached out to us and said, okay, we don't like what you say, but we think you've given us a fair hearing, whereas many other people will go in from a prejudiced point of view. So trying to be neutral and trying to be independent is difficult, because we've been offered large sums of money by gambling companies to buy the rights, effectively to buy the name of the show.
Yeah.
And to date, we've turned them all down, because I want to be able to criticise the gambling industry. Yeah. Because I think it is, I've got family and friends, and I've got friends who've got friends and family who have lost money, who have destroyed relationships, who have stolen from their family, all because of gambling. And I'm not be a hypocrite. If Paddy Power phoned me up and say, we're going to offer you 100 grand for the show, we'll take it. But at present, nobody's offering anywhere near that, of course. At present, we quite like the idea of being independent and being able to point the finger. We do get some snotty replies from clubs. I've had to deal with a lawsuit on one occasion, and that was fine, because I'm a nerd.
Because you got
that's what I am.
You got the facts and statistics in front of you that basically tells you this is all the truth.
Yeah, and the greatest defence in law is being factually accurate. So this owner of a particular club in the EFL didn't like what I said. So when his lawyers got in contact, I said, well, okay, fair enough. This comes from page 8 of your account, line 7, and this comes from page 12. This is, I didn't say this. All I've done is gone and said it in a public domain. Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the record, if any companies want to bid, we don't even need £100,000. I'd take £1,000 for this show. So £1,000 will do. So anyone out there, that's desperation and pleading. So obviously you mentioned before, Kieran, you're a Brighton fan. Have you got any memories of visiting Bury at all and coming watching Brighton play Bury?
Yeah, because I remember, I can't can't remember. I certainly I did buy a seat at Bury when you one of your many cash crises many years ago. Yeah, my greatest experience at Gig Lane was my kids would have been, so this would have been about probably about the year 2000. And we played at Gig Lane and we won 2-0. And Bobby Zamora chipped your keeper from 35 yards.
Right.
And we were in that end. And you know, sometimes as soon as you see somebody kick it, you go, that's in. Yeah. And you've got that second and a half of just going, it's in, it's in, it's in. And then you go mental. So that's probably my best memory. That was the year we got promoted. We really were on fire that season as well, because we were lucky enough to have Bobby Zamora for a few seasons.
I think we were on the way down then. I think that was our demise, that one. So I've obviously scrubbed that out of my memory, obviously. But Bobby Zamora was a cracking player. I remember him. And you obviously you got the Coca-Cola kid from Bury Football Club as well, didn't you, Colin Kazim-Richards?
We did, and it was a funny one because for people not familiar with the story, I think you effectively entered into a prize draw via Coca-Cola, who gave the buying club 250 grand to buy a player.
Yeah.
And we bought Colin Kazim-Richards for 35 grand, and I think the rest went into his wages and agents' fees and so on. So he came to Brighton, and there was an awful lot of news. There was an awful lot of publicity at the time. I think it's fair to say he was a moderate success.
Yeah. He did all right for himself, though, didn't he? He went and played for Turkey, didn't he? And
he's played in Brazil. He's played for Galatasaray. He's played for Besiktas. He's presently at Derby. I think he's one of those players who will look back at his career, or probably won't, because he will say he has been a very successful player. He's had a global footprint in football.
Definitely.
I think he's one of those players that we thought, and we sold him to Sheffield United at the end of first season. That he got 8 goals, and we were playing in the Championship, and we got relegated that season. But he could have got 15 goals if he just tried every match. On his day, Colin Kazim-Richards is a fantastic footballer.
Yeah.
Is his day every match? A lot depends on how he wakes up and what mood he's in the morning. And I know people at the club, and they said in training he would just take the mickey. He would do the bare minimum a lot of the time. And if you are 20 or 21, you can probably get away with that to an extent. But football is such fine margins that he could have been a Premier League player for many, many seasons. Yeah. He had one season with Sheffield United in the Premier League, and he scored one fantastic goal. But that was his only goal in the Premier League. But he has had a varied career. He will have made millions out of the game. He's represented his country nationally as far as Turkey is concerned. Yeah. So you've got to admire him for that. He had a sort of a love-hate relationship with the fans because, like all fans of lower league clubs, when you see a player not putting in a shift, you give them a lot of stick. Whereas if you've got a limited player who always gives 100%, fans' favourite.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I love about lower league football, is that's what it's all about, isn't it? You want to see that 100%. Yeah. Definitely. Right, nitty gritty. Let's get down to it. This week, it was announced that the European Super League has been devised by, there's 6 teams from this country, from England, that are part of it. Just tell us what your thoughts are and how you feel as a football fan about this kind of development.
Well, as we know, there are 4 Champions League places available. 6 into 4 doesn't go. When you've got clubs such as Leicester and West Ham who are having fantastic seasons, 6 into 2 doesn't go either. Yeah. So, so we presently have Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs and Arsenal, and they are 5th, 6th, 7th, and 9th in the Premier League. So that means they're not going to qualify. Yeah. If you get into the Champions League, you can make somewhere between 50 and 150 million pounds in terms of broadcast income and gate receipts. So those are the potential rewards, but they're not guaranteed. Now, we've got owners of football clubs at Arsenal, Liverpool, and Manchester United who are all from a US sports franchise background. So they've said, well, is there a way that we can play in the Champions League or its equivalent where we don't have to win football matches to get into it? And they go, well, what happens if we set up our own competition and we invite people in and we have no relegation? And they look at each other because, I teach at the University of Liverpool. I used to teach at University of Manchester. I know that Liverpool and United hate each other. So on a fan basis, they hate each other. At boardroom level, they're actually quite good mates. So therefore, you've got Stan Kroenke at Arsenal. You've got the Glazers at United, and you've got John Henry at Liverpool. And they say, well, let's have a little bit of a chat about this, boys. Here's a way of guaranteeing participation in the competition. And at present, of course, you've got 32 clubs in the Champions League. You've got those 8 groups of 4. And it is tedious. I think those group stages are dull as ditch water. And I think, it probably has run its course. And they say, well, okay, can we get a few other clubs interested who will be big clubs? So Real Madrid and Barcelona and Atletico, their finances are absolutely knackered. They are not run well. They're not run professionally from a financial perspective, and they've been hit really bad by COVID because they're more reliant upon ticket sales than clubs in the Premier League. So they have a word with them, and they say, "We know that you've got no money. What happens if we get a bank to give you an advance of your TV monies, and that will dig you out of a financial hole?" And Perez says, "I'll have some of that."
Yeah.
And so he's in favour of it. And the proposed tournament is you've got 20 clubs, 15 of whom are guaranteed to play in it every year. Mm-hmm. And then you've got 5 clubs who are going to be invited each year. Now, how they're going to be invited, we don't actually know. No details of that. And when you look, okay, so now we've got Champions League money being split between 30 clubs. The franchise league is going to be split between 15 clubs. And yes, they'll give a little bit of money to the 5 guest clubs. They don't want those guest clubs being too successful.
Yeah, of course.
Because otherwise they're going to look like a bunch of chumps. So they're just make weights. So we've got the money coming in, and then United have said, at present, the Premier League TV deal and the UEFA Champions League TV deal, those are negotiated by the Premier League and UEFA, and the money is distributed to the clubs on the basis of a formula. And those formulas are all geared towards these bigger clubs. But that's not good enough for the Glazers. No. They've said, well, hold on. We've got a bunch of gimps supporting us in Thailand, in China, in Japan, in Senegal, in the US, and they don't contribute anything. Yeah, again, this is where sort of my nerd side of things come through. Manchester United claim to have 1,100 million fans, but if you actually work out the numbers, Manchester United make 57 pence per fan per year.
Right.
So you take their total income, divide by, and you go, well, that's pretty crap, isn't it?
Yeah. Don't even get your Coke.
So let's take control of things. And under these proposals, Manchester United and Liverpool and Real Madrid and all these other clubs, they would be able to sell the rights to 3 of their home fixtures direct to the fans. So effectively on a pay-per-view basis.
Yeah.
Now let's just work out the numbers. United normally get about 250 million a year, let us say, from TV income. That's from the Premier League, and that's from that's from the Champions League and so on. So they get 250 million a year. They've got 1,100 million fans. Let's get 10% of those fans to pay for one match, and we're just going to charge them £2. And that's 220 million pounds from one match. You do that 3 times, you've got 660. Then you've got all the money coming in from the rest of the competition. Then you've got your Premier League money. And all of a sudden, the Glazers are thinking, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So that's what the driver is.
It's football for the Netflix, Amazon Prime generation, isn't it? You can just order it as you go along, you know, and that's not the football that we know and that we've fallen in love with. And I think that's what sticks in our teeth about it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's why Bury AFC exists, because you're in love with football and you're in love with that. I always say, you know, I can remember the first match I went to. My uncle took me to a football match, and I was, 8.5, 9 years old, and all I can remember was, and my uncle was a West Ham fan, so he took me to the old bowling ground. He said, I'll take you to that. And I remember getting on the tube train, getting off the tube train, and there were all these old blokes around, and everybody was drinking and singing, and they had the scarves and the noise and the floodlights and the burgers. And I thought, I'm in love. And I can remember the match, and I didn't support either team. I was just a little kid. And that was my introduction to football. Yeah. And I can't thank my uncle enough, because my old man wasn't a football fan. Yeah. My uncle gave me a love of football, and that stayed with me for life, just like your love of Bury will be for you for life.
Yeah.
But I am an old man, and there is a generation of people who are not from Manchester and not from Liverpool and will never go to Manchester or Liverpool. But Manchester United are opening 3 museums in China. So if they can go, and if they can get kids in China to say, Mum or Dad, Manchester United are playing tonight, and it's it's £2 to watch the match. Yeah. Well, you do the math. So from a moral and ethical, from a love of football point of view, this competition is absolutely disgusting. In the way that it's been organised by cowards who don't have the guts to come out and talk in public, the way that Liverpool strung out the manager to answer all the questions whilst John Henry is sitting at home. And John Henry is a really smart guy. He's a commodities broker. And and I look at him and say, and everybody that says he's incredibly smart and he knows the value of Liverpool as a brand. That's why he's got no interest in football. If you I'm sure if you spoke to his wife, who's about half his age, and you say, well, why did you fall in love with the 71-year-old billionaire? She will say, well, it's probably not due to the fact that he doesn't know the words to "You'll Never Walk Alone" very well. There will be other reasons.
Really nice personality, probably.
He's a really nice personality, and I've always been interested in commodity broking. That's what she'll say about the 71-year-old billionaire.
So, where do you see this going? Is this going to happen, or is it just the clubs flexing their muscles to organisations like UEFA and FIFA to try and get a bigger cut of advertising revenue, TV revenue? I can't help but think there's been that much of a backlash now from fans. I mean, we're only a couple of days into it, and we can see the backlash. So, do you think it will happen? And if not, what's going to be the alternative?
I think it might happen. I honestly think we're in a 50-50 situation. Manchester United wants to play in the Premier League because this is a midweek competition. Yeah. So what are they going to do on Saturdays otherwise? Liverpool wants to play in the Premier League and win it. The players want to win it. Marcus Rashford wants to play for England alongside Harry Kane. Well, there's a chance that he won't be allowed to if the government and some of the other threats come through in terms of international participation. And if FIFA, who seemed a bit wishy-washy initially in their response, but I saw footage of Infantino today saying you're either in or you're out. And you can't have the best of both worlds, which is of course what these clubs want. So it could go ahead. But whilst we've got Severin saying on one side, they're vipers, they're snakes. Yes, they are. They're businessmen. Ed Woodward is not a football fan. Ed Woodward is an investment banker. You don't go into investment banker if you've got any form of moral or ethical code about you. It's all about bottom line. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the way the industry operates. When they destroyed the world economy in 2007, and everybody was shouting, and they just go, get on with it. We'll get the government to dig us out, and we'll start all over again.
Do you think that is the problem with football? Do you think that football has now just become about money, and that fans, supporters, it doesn't matter how many scarves you have in the Kop, or United or City fans singing on a Saturday? Does that not matter anymore? Is it just about money? And if that is the case, how do we ever go back to? I mean, from my point of view, from a Bury AFC fan, and seeing, although our season got cut a little bit short this year, I've fallen back in love with football again. This is what it's about for me. I've got more involved in things because people have had to step up, and people have asked to, for volunteers and stuff like that. And for the first time in probably about 10, 11 years, I thought, this is what it's about. This is what it's like being a football fan again. And it's taken for my club to get completely rubbed into the dust, and for us to start trying to build something again from the kind of using memories and heritage and stuff that we've kind of cobbled together to fall in love with football again. So do you think that well, my question is money the problem? And can we ever get to a position where is there any going back? Is there any way that we can fall back in love with football again?
Unfortunately not. The direction of travel is only one way. All that we can do is to slow down the speed at which these people will steal our game. And that's what they're doing. So on a short-term basis, I think we can potentially put a spoke in their wheels, but that's as far as it goes. On a local level, there will still be, and people say, such and such, I hate all Manchester United fans, I hate all Liverpool fans. I don't. I've lived in Manchester and I've worked in Liverpool practically my whole working life. Some Manchester United fans, can I swear?
No.
Okay.
just slightly. I like touch on it lightly.
Okay. Some Manchester United fans are arses.
Yes.
Some Liverpool fans are arses. Yeah. But the vast majority of them are from L4. They're from Trafford. They're from Stretford, and they fell in love with Manchester United in Liverpool in the same way that I fell in love with football when I was a kid, because they took along by their family, and they were sat on their old man's shoulders, and they saw that first goal, and whether it was scored by Kenny Dalglish or Ian Rush or Dennis Law, and that was it, and they are proper fans. But football is a broader church than that. And I think that we are all, you and I, we're from the same stock. We are the football romantics.
Yeah.
There are people in China who support Manchester United, and they will claim that they love Manchester United, and they can probably quote every single result of the club for the last 7 years. But theirs is a different relationship. Theirs is ultimately a monetary relationship, because you didn't fall in love with Bury Football Club for glory, did you?
I certainly didn't, no.
Which was just as well. because you haven't had a lot of it.
I found that out the hard way, yeah, definitely. What do you think the impacts on the European Super League, or this is obviously had a negative backlash. Do you think this could have a positive spin on local non-league sides as people start turning their back? I know that there's people that have talked on social media about, I'll never go and watch United again, or I'll never go and watch City again whilst this is on the table. Do you think there could be a bit of a upsurge in maybe in local non-league football on the back of this?
I think there could be a small one, but remember, we're only talking about 6 clubs. So would it involve the majority of fans at Anfield? No, it wouldn't. If we take a look at what happened with the Glazers, that it did result in the creation of FC United of Manchester, of course, I saw them play at Gig Lane. Yeah, because we played them in a FA Cup replay at Brighton at Gig Lane. And I know loads of the lads that go there, and I suspect, a bit like you, they've fallen back in love with the game for the same reason why they fell in love with the game in the first place, because it's not a sanitized product. You know, you can be a bit more silly with your mates, you know, as opposed to, we are pretty conformist. Yeah, we've got these all-seater stadium, we've got the CCTV watching our every move, and that has been a force for some good. There's no doubt. You know, I'm old enough to remember going to Goodison Park in 1980 as an away fan, and it was one of the most scary experiences of my life. Now, do I want to be doing it, you know, for my kids and my grandkids? No, I don't.
No.
So yeah, let's not say that it's all bad. There have been improvements. There have been things which have made it a more generic, middle-class friendly product. But I don't. I think it could get a small local upswing, yes. But for every fan who rips up his or her season ticket at Anfield, what are they going to do? They're going to sell them to tourists.
Yeah.
And actually, the tourists make more money because they go along with their selfie sticks and their
go in the mega store. They go in the mega
store. Yeah, and they'll buy the program, and you know they'll take their photographs, and and I mustn't sound too elitist, because you know I hold them in utter contempt, because I've been to Halifax on Tuesday night and they haven't. But I shouldn't do that, because they have a different love for the club to you or I.
Yeah, it's a different type of. So, just kind of touching on kind of the first. You talked about the first podcast that you did was off the back of Bury's coming demise, really. When did Bury Football Club first come onto your radar, and what were the alarm bells, and kind of tell me a little bit about leading up to that first podcast?
Well, I mean, this is a terrible thing. I have a spreadsheet on which I monitor the finances of all of the 92 clubs in the Premier League, the EFL, and I've now expanded it to look at the clubs in the National League as well. So I'd known for sort of 2 or 3 years prior to Bury's things really getting bad that the club was losing 30 to 40 grand a week.
Yeah.
And Stuart Day was subsidising the club from his other businesses. And then when you start to look into his other businesses, because the nature of the work that I did, I am a chartered accountant in theory, though I walked away. I was a useless one. But you get into that mentality of being nosy. So I sort of looked into some of his other businesses, and to me, they looked precarious. They looked like a house of cards. So it came as no great surprise that he sold the club.
Yeah.
And like everybody else, I didn't know who Steve Dale was. And initially, it looked as if he was saying the right things. And of course, you're as fans, you're focusing on what's happening on the pitch. But social media and following football on a broader level, some of the stories were starting to come out. So the fact that he immediately set up these companies, Bury FC Heritage and Bury FC this, and was transferring assets. Although you don't see that. You say, well, why has he set up these 2 new companies? That just seems a bit strange. And then the stories started to leak out. The players haven't been paid. He's cancelled all the standing orders to the utility companies. And as more and more came out, you thought, hold on, let's investigate this guy a bit further. So my biggest friend on the internet is Companies House.
Yeah.
And this is a free service available to everybody.
I think everybody watching this is familiar with a certain website with S Dale in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go into Steve Dale's history and you look at his history of a director, and there's an awful lot of clubs that are in liquidation. Well, so what does this mean? Steve Dale is a bottom feeder. And by that, and when I used to be an accountant, I used to be an administrator, i.e. you go in and you run companies who had gone bust and you'd sell them on to somebody. And what Steve Dale was actually quite good at doing was buying these companies from the liquidator and just stripping them of all the assets and then abandoning them. And if that happens to an engineering company, and if that happens to a laundrette, you say, well, that's a shame. You know, a few people have lost their jobs. Nobody celebrates these things, but to a certain extent, you think, well, that's business.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody does survive.
It's the community and the emotional ties that go around a football club, isn't it?
Absolutely. When it is a football club, and you know, why do I? You know, I'm not being rude here. Why do I know that Bury exists, but people out there and football fans know that Bury exists, but they haven't heard of Gorton, and they haven't heard of, you know, Harper Hay and other places? It's because Bury have a football club, and we as football fans know, you know, about Bury and the FA Cup and the history. And it's just one of those things, you know, as a football fan, because it comes up in quizzes, you know, and it's, and you want to go to Gig Lane because you want to go to as many grounds, you know, from that stock of football fan, you're aware. And then you think, well, you know, this could be my club. And certainly as a Brighton fan, you know, we at our club, Steve Dale bought Bury Football Club for £1. Our club was bought in 1995 by a guy called Bill Archer for 56 quid. And then 2 years later, of course, we're evicted from our ground because he'd flogged it off. So to a certain extent, it was, well, we know what Bury have been through, so we need to investigate further. And the more you dig into Steve Dale and, you know, the stuff that was coming out on the website and that infamous Tony Livesey interview, you know, all the alarm bells were going. I went to a couple of meetings at Bury Town Hall. Now, you know, I'm just a Brighton football fan, so I kept my head down and I just listened. And it was like being at somebody's funeral. The fact that, you know, you were at those meetings as well. Yep. And it was like a family funeral where the family doesn't get on because there were factions starting to appear. Everybody was angry. Everybody was looking for an answer, for a solution. And Steve Dale was sitting at home just chuckling away from himself. So, you know, I was really angry, and I'd spoken to, you know, I had one or two connections with James Firth, who was the MP at the time. I can probably say this now. I also met up with the guys in London who were trying to buy the club. One of the guys was
Alex Campbell's son,
nephew, yes, son. So I met up with them just to, and I say, you know, you can have all of my data. You know, the lawyers were charging them a lot of money, but, you know, for me, I'm a football fan. I want Bury Football Club to survive. So I will try and help in any way I can. This is the financial data that's available. These are the potential issues that would arise from an administration, from my experience of doing administrations 20 years ago. The legislation has changed, but anything that you can do. And, you know, I was sort of in contact with them on an informal basis, and they were genuinely keen. But Steve Dale just made it. Steve Dale's master plan was for him to keep control of the company and make a lot more money from eventually selling the assets of the club. Because, you know, Gig Lane's it's in a state of disrepair. It's falling down more and more by the day. You know, at some point in time, people are going to say it's a bit of an eyesore. Can we get rid of it? And then he goes, I'm playing the long game here.
Yeah.
And people know it. So that's how I sort of was observing what was happening with Bury. When the club finally went into, when it was finally kicked out of the EFL, which was self-interest, because you had clubs there thinking, well, we dropped down to 91 clubs. That's one less club that's dropping in. So, yeah, if you think about it, if you're a League Two club at the start of the season, we've got a 2 in 24 chance of dropping into the National League. We get rid of Bury, it's no longer 2 in 24, it's 1 in 23. We're better off. So everybody's operating in self-interest. I'm not the biggest fan of Sean Harvey. I did set up a year ago something called the Sean Harvey appreciation thread on social media, which somehow was trending on Twitter because people worked out the initials from the hashtag, and I listed all of his achievements, including what had happened to Bury. And at the time, of course, Bolton were in a very similar situation because they were being controlled by a guy called Ken Anderson, who had previously been banned from being a director of any company in the UK for 8 years. And yet he was allowed to take over an EFL football club. Yeah. So, yeah, that's how we became involved. And when I sort of spoke to Kevin the first time we met him, and we literally just met in a pub, and I'm going, you're the guy that used to be on top of, used to be on Match of the Day. So I'm sort of starstruck. I'm going, you're a celebrity.
Yeah.
And Kevin is absolutely brilliant. I think people really underestimate what he does for the show, because he sort of tells everybody, no, I don't do any research, I don't do any work, I just rock up. He does an awful lot of work in the background.
Yeah.
And also, what people don't give him credit for, he said, okay, I need to assess this from my point of view, because to have a successful product, a show, as it were, a podcast, he says we've got to inform, educate, and entertain. And those three things,
the ethos,
that you've got through those three things. He says, okay, you can educate, you're a teacher, you can inform because you're a nerd, but you can't entertain. So he says, right, what we're going to do, we're going to make this a sort of a sitcom where we're going to create two characters. So the person that I am on the podcast some of the time is my sitcom character.
Yeah.
A lot of what I say is true, and a lot of it is, there's all these stories about my Uncle Terry being a villain. My Uncle Terry didn't necessarily always comply with the law, but he wasn't quite up to, he wasn't Brinksmat, he wasn't a safe robber or thing. So we tried to do it to make us look human, to make people realize that we are football fans. Otherwise, he said, there's no way that I can sell me.
Otherwise, it just becomes question, answer, which obviously, like you say, it's And I think that's one thing that I think that's why you've got the popularity that you've got, that you've been able to gather, is that it's those two characters, but also it's the entertain, it's the stories about your time in Russia. It's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of stuff, but layered in there is those little kind of nuggets about what's happening at Sheffield Wednesday, or what's happening at Derby, or what's happening, and I think that's what, and for me, the reason I started listening to the podcast simply is because I wanted to know what was going on at my football club, because I wasn't getting it from anywhere else, and that was my go-to. So I think that's one of the amazing, as a football fan, that's one of the things that why I went to your podcast, because I literally wanted to know, because accounts aren't spoken about. You never see.
Why should they?
No, exactly. So, on the back of all the wrongdoings by a certain W Puffin at Bury, by the way, that is one of the most commonly used phrases on the Up the Shakers message board, I think.
Oh, is it? I'm absolutely chuffed by that. I'm made up.
It's definitely got into the Bury lexicon. But yeah, so what's your views on Bury AFC then, and the kind of, like I said, we've talked about all the disappointments with Bury Football Club. What's your personal views on what we've done and what we've set up, and how does it look from an outsider looking in?
I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's brought a sense of community. I love the transparency involved. I get to see the numbers myself. The club's always been fantastic to me and very open. I remember Sammy coming on our show, and just the excitement of that first match. I think it's wonderful. It's given people a bit of hope. It's helped them in terms of their identity. And I just wish nothing but good wishes and good luck, and looking forward to see the club move through the divisions. It won't be easy. And what you tend to find in any sort of phoenix or new event or new creation is that there's an initial great sense of togetherness, and everybody mucks in, and then people start to drop off. This is what, if you take a look at what happened with FC United of Manchester, that in those initial few years were absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And then, they started to fall into two camps within the supporter base, and it started to get quite unpleasant. So I think that you've got to have good communication all the time. I think people's expectations have to be realistic. And if there's a season where things don't go as good as they can, you've still got Bury AFC to support. It's still part of your lives, and it still represents you, and you represent it. So all of those things, I think, are great. I think the kit's fantastic. It's so traditional. I'm just admiring them in your background. I'll be onto the website soon. My wife gets so hacked off with me because I'm always buying football kits when I've had people on the podcast and things. And things of a similar nature. So, you're moving in the right direction, but it won't be easy. There will be some, barriers in the road. I think the only thing that is sad is that, clearly there is still a split amongst the fan base. And I don't know the full details behind it. And I don't think this is probably the forum for me to really talk about it, but I see it on social media because I'll sometimes get involved in a Bury discussion. And I can't understand, because you are all people of Bury Town. And surely what you have in common should be far greater than what you have in different views. So that's a shame. And I think there's Steve Dale playing games in the background in respect of that.
So, would you say? I mean, obviously, you're a self confessed football nerd. Is there any models around the world, or any kind of? And I don't mean models as in the ones like you used to visit in Russia or anything like that. I mean models as in football financial models. Is there anything that kind of that we can turn to and look at as a way of kind of modeling, or do you think it's kind of like it has to be quite organic and you have to go with the kind of the waves of the tide, really?
Well, I think because we operate in a system of promotion and relegation, and the financial implications of that can be so significant, that having a long-term model is important, because you say we can have a poor season, but our objective is in 5 years' time to be X, and you work out what it's going to cost you in each of those divisions in advance. And I think the other thing to be really careful about is to not fall victim to temptation, because you could be in Northwest Counties or National League North or wherever it's going to be in a few years' time, and you're seventh, and somebody says, I hear that Stalybridge have got this really hot centre forward. It's going to cost us 20 grand for a fee, and he's looking for he's looking for 800 quid a week, and we normally pay 500. But he's red hot. And then what do you do under those circumstances? Living beyond your means is risky, and having been through what you have been through, absolutely. I would always promote caution, but that's why I'm a really bad poker player, because I'm naturally cautious. So I think that will be the biggest challenge for you, is that having a budget it is dull and boring and tedious, and the temptation to go beyond the budget will always be there, because Bury AFC will get more news than its peer group, because of the legacy of Bury Football Club. And I think you've got to be a little bit cautious about that, because you will be seen as the big fish potentially, especially in your embryonic years, in particular divisions. And you've got to be a little bit careful that you show respect and humility, which I'm sure the club does anyway. And if somebody beats you, you shake them by the hand and walk away, and you don't go say, right, we're going to show these. So that lad who came on trial last week, we will meet what he wants on a weekly basis, and we'll give him an extra 20 quid boot money on top of that to keep him sweet, because the history of football tends to not work like that, and you end up living beyond your means, and it comes back to bite you on the bum. Do
you think fan-owned clubs have a glass ceiling? Is there only so far that I mean, I know Wimbledon, for example, they're a great example of how they've managed to move up the leagues, still maintaining that fan ownership. What about we've talked briefly about the ESL. We've talked about, the Glazers and FSG and all that kind of stuff. But in the modern day market, is there room for a fan-owned club to move through the divisions and gain success?
Yes, there is. There is but you are right. There is a natural ceiling, and that natural ceiling, in my opinion, is League One. And the reason why I say that is that if you take a look at the Championship, the average losses of a Championship football club are £400,000 a week.
Right.
Now, no fan-owned club can operate in that environment, and that will give you a big decision to make, because we have seen Wycombe Wanderers, which was fan-owned, sell out to Ron Cohag, and they're now in the Championship. I think it's going to be their one season in the Championship, but hey, they got to the Championship, fantastic achievement. But they've sold out to an American lawyer. Now, I don't mean sold out by, as in, sell out. And that was out of financial necessity, because having spoken to the guys at Wycombe, that they were in deep trouble. They were genuinely facing administration. I've had quite a lot of dealings with fans at Portsmouth. And again, they were sold by scumbag owner to scumbag owner to scumbag owner, and the fans rescued the club, as tends to be the case. You are still a Portsmouth football fan. It is still part of your life. You will do anything you can. So they built it up, and then Michael Eisner came along, former head of Disney. What do you do under those circumstances? So the club was sold to Michael Eisner. Now, to be fair to him, he appears to be an American owner. Oh, okay, he's from Disney. He knows how to say the right things, which is more than you can say for Glazers, John Henry and Stan Kroenke. And to date, I think the amount of fan engagement and fan representation has been superb. Would Portsmouth be able to get from League One to the Championship without him? Even though they've got a really good fan base, I think they could get promoted, but their life in the Championship would be pretty hellish. So that's where we are. So provided, I think the fans say, we bury AFC. Our long-term goal is to get into the EFL, but and from there, we could have a few good draws in the Carabao Cup. Make some progress in the FA Cup, get to League One would be our objective, and that's it. Now, by all means, in League One, you can still have a damn good season, because I know Andy Holt at Accrington. They were doing really well, and then they've had a bit of a dip in form. So you can certainly get out of League One into the Championship, but if you ever do get there, just don't try to compete financially, because it is a real viper's nest. Remember, you would be competing against clubs who 12 months ago were in the Premier League, have got £40 million of parachute payments. Just go up and enjoy it. And provided everybody knows that ultimately we do try to enjoy the football side of things, and which seems a bit of a paradox, because as a Brighton fan and as a Bury fan, that the majority of matches you're going to come away from is going to be one of misery. But you'll see more defeats than victories, but my argument is it makes the victories all that much sweeter.
Absolutely. It's going to, well, the one thing I think most of the Bury AFC fans are looking forward to is the journey, and wherever that journey takes us. But I think the important thing, and this is why we try to do this podcast, is it's about fan engagement. It's about speaking to people about from the club and outside the club as well. So we've had players on, we've had other managers on, we've had journalists on. So I think that's it. And as long as that dialogue, you said about the guy at Portsmouth, as long as that dialogue's happening, I think fans are generally happy with that. As long as there's an engagement, and I think that's where football is going wrong. Is that kind of there's that barrier between player and fan, and football club and fan, and that's where the issues lie.
Yeah, agree with you entirely.
Definitely. Right, just to finish off with you, Kieran, why would Bury AFC fans enjoy reading your book, Price of Football? So give it a little plug. So you've just got a second edition out. Look at that, I'm giving that right plug there. So tell us a little bit about the book, and why would Bury AFC fans enjoy giving it a read?
Well, I wrote the book because there wasn't a book on football finance. And given that I teach the subject, I had students saying, well, what are we supposed to read? So I originally wrote the book, and
That's convenient. Just read my book. It's $15.99.
And I thought, I thought exactly the same, that the only people that are going to buy it will be my students. So I've got, I normally teach 140, 150 students a year. So it'll sell 150 copies. So then, when it was all kicking off at the start of COVID, and I read a story about, remember, we were hoarding toilet rolls, and everybody was going, getting 27 cans of baked beans when they visited the supermarket, and I read a story about a bunch of ratbags who raided a food bank in Yorkshire. And sometimes you just get really angry about things, because I think food banks, we should not need them in a mod, we're the 5th richest nation in the planet, but, we do. But to steal from a charity, I think, is the lowest of the low. So I phoned up the publisher just before the book was due to come out and said, I want all of the royalties from the book to go to a food bank charity. I thought, okay, that's 140 quid. So 140 students I've got. I get about 80 or 90 pence per each copy of the book. So 100 quid to charity. That I'm doing my bit. And I went along to my local food bank with, I've been down with a couple of carrier bags. I said, right, I've done my bit. And then the podcast had taken off, and I used the same name for the book as the podcast, but no, I'm not a marketeer. This wasn't brand extension or awareness.
Synergy.
Synergy. Oh, okay, right. And a few weeks later, the book was #1 in Amazon's sports books. And my missus is saying to me, well, that's more than
where's all that money gone? Where's all that? She was concerned.
That's more than 140 copies. I go, yeah. And I phoned up the publisher. I said, just out of interest, how many copies? And he told me. And I go, okay. So the missus goes, how much have you given away? I go, well, a bit more than 100 quid, but I'd rather not say. And the first edition sold very well. And look at the reviews of it. I aim to keep things simple, because I work in higher education with all of these professors, all of these really clever people, and I sit in meetings with them, and all that I do is nod, because I don't understand what they're saying, because I'm from a South London estate, grew up in Brighton, supporting my local football club, and I was lucky enough. I was lucky enough to get to university, so I'm not stupid, but I'm not super. I work with super smart people who are really clever, but they can't necessarily talk at a level of a bloke in a pub. And I've always prided myself is that I can explain things to the bloke in the pub. So the book is aimed for the bloke that goes to the pub, and he'll go, well, where do they get their money from, and what do they spend it on, and what's this not amortization nonsense? And well, how come Manchester United were worth 2.5 billion? So the book is there to try to explain things which I try to talk about to Kevin on the show. So it is basic finance, but it is all focused on football, and it does come from the view of a football fan. So one of the chapters is called "Why Buy a Football Club? Love, Vanity, and Insanity," and that is why. You've got the local fan who's made a few quid and has always supported the club. So Simon, I hate Crystal Palace. I'm a Brighton fan, but I hate to say this. Me and Simon Jordan sometimes phone each other up. We've got each other's numbers because he actually talks a lot of sense, and I hate to say that because I'm a Brighton fan. He bought his club out of love. My club owner, Tony Bloom, bought Brighton Hove Albion. He's put 400 million quid into the club. He bought it out because he loves the club. And I love the fact that if I go to an away match, I'll see Tony Bloom on the train coming back because he doesn't want to travel with the squad, and he'll be there
with the fans,
with his sandwiches. He's got his Adidas, the old Adidas sports holdall. He's got one of those. Okay. I love you so much.
If only you'd not given all that money to that food bank, you could have very well bought Brighton Hove Albion.
I didn't sell that many copies. And then another one of the flags is called Red Flags, the things you need to watch out for. So again, sort of I've sort of built up this bank of knowledge. I'm not clever, but I know a lot of useless facts. So the stories about how clubs get around the rules. Derby County employing Tom Ince's mum as a youth scout to avoid financial fair play by paying her 700 grand. That's a great story, but it comes from a financial angle. So the book contains all of that type of stuff. We're now on to a second edition because I've updated all the numbers, and we've got COVID and Project Big Picture, which I wasn't a big fan of. And so that's where we are. But if you can't sleep at night and you want something to send you to sleep, it's the perfect book.
I think you've been very modest, Kieran. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I know you've had an incredibly busy week, and we hope that you'll one day be able, if you're ever up in Manchester or up into Liverpool, you'll be able to come and see us play at some point.
Would absolutely love to. I get myself and Kevin do get invites actually, and we're going to go on. I think we're trying to go on some sort of tour. We've been invited to host the show at Shrewsbury and Lincoln and Arbroath. So we'd love to come to Bury as well. Because we do feel an affinity with the club because it's where we started our journey, and it's such a cliched word, but it's where we started the podcast off. It was our first story. It was the first thing that made us realise that we had the same values. We had the same degree of anger towards Steve Dale and the same sense of betrayal of the game by these people.
Kieran, thank you so much for your time. Cheers.
Thank you.
Many thanks there to football finance expert Kieran Maguire, whose podcast, The Price of Football, goes out on the same platforms as ours. It is available on Acast and on Spotify and also on Apple. So go and check it out. You can also follow our progress, Bury AFC, on the social networks. That's on Facebook, on TikTok, and on Twitter. And don't forget, you can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got goals, heritage videos, and a few more shaken up shows. So until next time, we'll see you later. Goodbye.